Well, someone's trying to kill the president. This is part 2 of our podcast series, and it could be more broad than you think. So let me ask you a question. Are we becoming a more violent nation when it comes to politics? Is it really worse than it has ever been for America? Well, we're going to answer that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. It's what some people they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. The Charlie Crimebuster name and all forms and abbreviations are property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains adult subject matter. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to today's program. We're glad to have you on the Charlie Crime train today. We're actually in part 2 of a series of podcasts about the assassination of the United States president. And we're going to be answering some really important questions today. When violence takes a nation and targets that violence toward the President of the United States, that's pretty serious business. But let me ask you a question. Is it worse now than it has ever been? We're going to answer that question and more on today's program, of course. But before we do that, let me take a moment to say thank you for joining us. Hey, by the way, do me a favor, rate, review, subscribe. You see, when you do that, that enables us to reach more people with the podcast. If you leave us a 5-star rate, then that helps us push out the podcast to more people. And by the way, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. That way you will be notified every time we drop a podcast. And before we get into today's program, just a little more housekeeping. If you have not yet check out peacemakernetwork.com, our sponsor. There you'll find the brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. And you can be a part of helping support those brave men and women. And they need our support today more than ever. I'm talking about law enforcement, but I'm also talking about the military. And I'm also talking about those wonderful first responders who, when you call, they come running. And when we call them, most of the time, we really, really need them. So take a moment to check all that out.
The following podcast is brought to you by peacemakernetwork.com. peacemakernetwork.com. Audio is provided by pixabay.com. That's pixabay.com.
All right, let's get right into today's program. Last week, we talked about the 3 well-publicized events where there was an attempted assassination of the President of the United States. However, would it surprise you to know that there's been more than those 3 major attempts? There's actually been 5 major attempts, and that's not counting other confirmed threats. Could it be that our current president has more people trying to kill him than any other? Well, we'll attempt to answer that on today's podcast. But right now, let's just take a little closer look at some of those major attempts on the president's life. I guess we could call this part 1, the credible threats. You see, since entering national politics in 2015, and especially during and after the presidencies, well, Donald Trump has faced multiple confirmed threats, assassination attempts, and, of course, security incidents. Here's a timeline of some of those major publicly reported cases. We're going to share that timeline right now on today's program. Some of you have forgotten that in June 2016, there was a campaign rally in Las Vegas. There was a guy by the name of Michael Sanford, and he attempted to grab a police officer's gun at a Trump rally in Nevada. And the prosecutors say that he was going to take that gun and he intended to shoot Trump. Now, he was arrested immediately. As a former police officer myself, I will tell you that gun retention is very important in the life of an officer. Because once somebody takes your gun, then they have a deadly weapon in their own hands. And they can, of course, cause bodily harm to you or others. And so this was certainly a very serious threat. Thankfully, they were able to take him down and they were able to arrest him. Then the next one is one that we all know about, all too much. In July 2024, it was in Butler, Pennsylvania, an outside rally. This, of course, I think was one of the most serious attacks that has really faced the president there in Butler. There, a gunman, a young man by the name of Thomas Matthew Crook, well, he fired multiple shots from a rooftop. If you recall, our other past podcasts has talked about the, immense security breaches that happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. Why no one was watching that roof from the Secret Service, I have no idea. Why there was not people even stationed on that roof, I have no idea. It was a clear shot from the outer security realm that was made that day and actually struck the president in the ear. It glazed his ear. And it also, by the way, killed one other person, and others were injured before that shooter was killed by counter snipers. The next one happened in September 2024. Remember that one? That's at the golf course. Their secret agents spotted an armed suspect right there lying in the bushes. That guy was identified as Ryan Wesley Ruth. He has since been sentenced for his deed. Investigators did describe it as an apparent assassination attempt. If you recall that one, remember the agent was walking ahead of Trump and spotted him in the bushes. Now let's go to February 2026. There was a Margot perimeter breach. There was an armed man that was found carrying a shotgun and a gas can. He actually breached the perimeter near Mar-a-Lago. And secret agents did exactly what they were supposed to do. They responded, shot, and killed the suspect after he refused their commands. By the way, Trump was not at the property at that time. Nonetheless, this was no doubt a threat, a very serious threat against the President of the United States. That brings us back to April 2026, just a few weeks ago, at the White House Correspondent Dinner. There, a heavily armed man attempted to reach the event that was attended there by Trump. Now, we do know that this suspect exchanged gunfire with Secret Service personnel, and he was taken into custody without incident. By the way, there was a Secret Service agent that was shot. Thankfully, he had a bulletproof vest on, and he did not receive serious injuries. Now, the prosecutors, they are charging this suspect with attempted assassination and related firearms offenses. Now, beyond these 5 major events, there have been other reoccurring threats against the president. Federal agencies have investigated online death threats, numerous of them. There's even been suspicious packages that have been delivered. There have been armed rally disruptions, and there's even been investigation of some foreign-linked plots, including the Iranian threats that was reported after the 2020 killing of an Iranian general. So there have been a lot. Now, people who study this, the historians and other security analysts, they will say that modern presidents and major candidates, well, they commonly face threats. So it's not really new that Trump would be threatened, that this president would be threatened. But we have to all think Trump, my friend, has experienced an unusually high number, and get this, of publicly documented incidents. Now, it's really important to remember those 3 words, publicly documented incidents. And those publicly documented incidents, my friend, have been in a very relative short period of time. So the next question is why? Why Trump? And before you answer, well, because Trump is Trump, let's dig a little deeper. And we're going to do that in just a moment. But right now, it's time for us to pause on the podcast and share with you something to lighten the load that we do every week. It is now time for Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, our crazy crook story this week is not a Florida man, but this is another man in the United States of America. It happened around 11 a.m. on March 24th at the Salinas Courthouse. There, authorities tell us that a guy by the name of Ricardo Otero was expected to appear for a hearing relating, now get this, listen carefully, to a pending auto theft case. But instead of arriving quietly, well, he pulled into the courthouse parking lot behind the wheel, hang on to it, of a vehicle that had already been stolen out of San Jose. Well, members of the multi-agency detail combating auto theft, which people call it Mad Cat, us agencies and law enforcement people, we love those initials, don't we? Mad Cat, multiple agency detail combating auto theft. Well, this Mad Cat team was already in position, and they recognized that situation immediately. Even before the suspect made it to the courtroom, well, officers stopped him outside the courtroom, placed him under arrest. Now, remember, my friend, in this situation, there was no chase, there was no resistance, and there was no dramatic confrontation. But the simplicity of this arrest makes this even more striking. The alleged suspect literally drove himself directly into custody. And boy, then, I'm telling you, Otero's legal situation, it changed dramatically. In a matter of minutes, what began as just a simple scheduled court appearance, well, my friend, it quickly turned into a second arrest, even with additional charges layered one upon the other on top. Well, authorities are telling us now he faces, charges for unlawful driving or taking a vehicle, committing a felony while released on bail. By the way, he didn't really pay for that bail. He was left out on bail without even paying for it. So he had it going for him, didn't he? But now he's charged with committing a felony while released on bail, and also other charges, driving with a suspended license. So this idiot not only pulled up to the courthouse with a stolen vehicle, he was driving on a suspended license right there in front of everybody. Surprise, surprise, surprise. We call these guys crazy crooks for a reason. Now, my friend, I want you to know those are just not minor charges. Each new charge, well, it increases the penalties and it complicates his defense running forward. Now, my friend, when we tell these funny stories, we don't really mean to make light of it because auto theft is a persistent issue. And this is why, my friend, we need stricter enforcement measures. And we need to really make it hurt when people steal cars. Because when that happens, insurance rates go up. And we all have security concerns about our own automobiles. Let me just leave this by saying a couple things. Please don't forget, lock your car. Most cars are stolen because people leave the keys in them and they don't even lock the car. Be careful where you park and all means be observant. So my friend, this crazy crook who was so stupid that he drove to the courthouse in another stolen vehicle while he's facing charges of stealing vehicles and then on top of that had a suspended license, well, he is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's crazy crook of the week. All right, back to our main focus. Now, we can't help but think, why are we seeing so many things like this happening against this particular president? Why is it that Trump has faced an unusually large number of publicly reported threats and security incidents, especially compared with recent presidents? There are several reasons, really. We're going to talk about some of them today. Number one, of course, is what we call media visibility, I should say. In the media, Trump is very, very visible. You and I both know he has frequent rallies. That's really what set him aside, I believe, in his very first election. These rallies that he would conduct, attended by thousands of people, that was heavily pushed on television. And of course, we know he has a social media presence. Every day in the news, you hear about another tweet or some other posting that the president has made, even into the wee hours of the morning. I read the other day that the people that manage him, or the people that, I don't guess you ever managed President Trump, but the people there that are there to assist him, they even take it in shifts because he's up so much in the daytime. He gets very little sleep. One has the morning shift and the other has the night shift, so that if he needs to reach out, he can reach out at all times of the night, all times of the morning to the people. So this guy is online constantly. And then, of course, the ongoing campaign activity, even outside election seasons. And, of course, we all know about his highly public, legal, and political battles. Now, I say all this to simply say this to you. More visibility of anyone, not just Trump, but anybody, generally means more opportunities for threats to come and be publicly noted. There's more scrutiny from the journalist who covers those. That gets pushed out to all kinds of people, and out there in that mass group of people, there's always somebody who seemingly is a little off balance and willing to act and then become a danger to the president. And of course, we all know that another reason is because of these open air rallies. If you remember after Butler, there were some people saying that, well, we're probably going to have to scale down rallies and just have inside rallies. Well, that did not happen. There are still more open air rallies. And when you're open air like that, it lends opportunities for people to attempt to assassinate someone. We don't have to think very, very far to go back to the assassination of the young man Charlie Kirk, who was shot there on the college campus with his rally, where he would debate people back and forth. Again, it was an open air rally. Butler was an open air rally. When President Kennedy was shot, he was out in the open air, and Trump is constantly out in the open air. So one of the reasons why we're seeing, I believe, these increased opportunities is because of the media and because of the open air rallies. But there's something else too. Not just the fact that it's on the media, but there are these people online who are trying to stir the pot, if you please. We even now have proof that, and this is on both sides of the political fence, whoever's the president, there are other countries that love to report that we have problems in America. They love to stir the pot. They love to push conspiracy theories. They love to push personal grievances. They love the extremist narratives. And that, my friend, can in turn produce what we call copycat behavior. Somebody sees something that somebody does and they copy it. That happens often, even in what we used to call years ago suicide clusters. They want to copy it. Somebody commits suicide and he says, well, that's what I should do. Somebody attempts to shoot the President of the United States and this other idiot says, this is what I should do. You see, these threats at one time pretty well stayed private, but now they are frequently appearing online. And there is that group of people out there, whether it's foreign or here in this country, who are agitating these threats, making them much more visible and more likely to be documented. And then, of course, there's the overlapping controversies that President Trump has around him. He has survived 2 impeachments. He has survived numerous criminal investigations. There is the January 6th aftermath. There is the disputes of the election and numerous civil and criminal court proceedings. Every major controversy generates spikes in threats, and law enforcement tracks these. And you can easily see this, that the more controversy, the more threats. So there are reasons why we're seeing all of these things take place, and it's not just because Trump is Trump. It is because of the improved public reporting today and transparency today. We have more things that are reported today. More people know what's happening in the world. It is just the way the world is turning. And these threat investigations, well, to be honest with you, they get more publicity. There have always been threat investigations in every president's life. But these modern day threat investigations are more publicly visible. We now have 24-hour news coverage. Used to, you'd turn on your television at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night and you'd watch the news. Today, news is 24-hour coverage. Now, the court databases are now become public. There is people today who take all these charges and all these filings, and now they are suddenly broadcast to the world. Then, of course, you have to put on top of that social media. Everybody today is on social media, and more of this is being pushed. And so we're finding that this is happening more and more. And by the way, let me say something else. One of the reasons why we know more about this is that prosecutors now are actually aggressively going after these online threats. We have here in Volusia County, where I'm from, just about every month I read about some threat against the sheriff, Sheriff Chitwood, who is I think a fantastic sheriff. And yet he's threatened all over the country. Today I heard about somebody in California who is actually being arrested for making a threat. And that happens. And what happens here in Volusia County is our law enforcement goes after those threats. And they will put that guy on an airplane and fly him to the airport here in Volusia County, where guess what? The sheriff himself is there to welcome them and to make sure that they have an escort to lodging that's provided by the Volusia County Correction System. So this is happening even locally here in our county of Volusia County with threats against the sheriff. How much more that will happen with threats against the president. So there are reasons why we're seeing all of these things happening, and it seems to be increasing. On top of that, you got to think about the fact that President Trump is not only a United States political figure, but probably one of the most internationally recognized political personalities in the world. He has broad visibility. And that, of course, increases the pool of potential threat people, even foreign extremists, and those who have all kinds of certain thoughts and ideas, and they are motivated by these thoughts and ideas. Now, security experts would generally caution that most threats against presidents never progress beyond what we call rhetoric or planning. But even these unsuccessful threats are now taken much more seriously because of this high visibility and this importance of the particular position. So the next question we have to ask ourselves, are we becoming a more violent society when it comes to politics? Well, there's certainly evidence out there that there is a political hostility that has increased in the past years, including the United States and other places. But for many people, the picture is mixed. Political violence remains rare, actually, when you really think about it. Now, think about it in the terms of what I'm talking to you about. Political violence is really rare compared to ordinary violent crime. I mean, we read about these few incidents, or even numerous incidents, but that's nothing to what you see every day happening in America. Just today, I was reading about a guy at a place nearby here in Palatka, Florida, that was in his vehicle, a big pickup truck. He was going through this crowd, mowing people down, and he was shot by police. And there's going to be a lot of controversy about that, but that happens every day. Just look at your news every day. Somebody's shot. Some mass shooting takes place almost every week. You're reading about mass shootings taking place. So violence is increasing, but it is much more violent out in the public than it is targeted to presidents or those people who are in office. Now, here is what does appear to be increasing, though. Threats against public officials. And it's not just presidents. Judges now are being threatened. Election workers are being threatened. Members of Congress are being threatened. Even school board officials and journalists are being threatened. In fact, the U.S. Capitol Police and FBI are now saying that there are sharp rises in threat investigations since back in 2010. And now we have political intimidation that's much more visible. We have harassment at public meetings. There is that doxing. You know what doxing is, where everybody will give out your address and then encourage people to go to your home and then to protest at your home or to aggravate you or to harass you in public. There is that terrible, terrible thing called swatting, where they call in a threat and say somebody's in the house about to shoot somebody. And so then a SWAT team arrives up at your house while you're sleeping peacefully, knock down your door, and you are certainly invaded by a SWAT team. There are now armed demonstrations and politically motivated assaults. And of course, social media again amplifies these events and makes them feel like they're just everywhere. And now there is almost the acceptance of political violence. Most Americans will say, and let me say this again, and I think it's important for us to get the balance. I think it's important for us to see reality here. Most Americans oppose political violence. But there is now a larger minority than in previous decades. And some of these people are saying, now listen to this. This is what's very scary and frightening, and you and I need to think about. There are people today who are now saying that violence can be justified for political goals. Just think about the United Healthcare administrator who was shot in cold blood and how that young man is now receiving millions of dollars in his court fund to support him. You know, years ago, I would not have believed that would happen, that a person could go down and gun down an American citizen, an American businessman on a sidewalk, and then find that they can raise millions of dollars to support them. It's literally raising money for cold-blooded murder. I hate that, and I think you ought to hate it too. And yet it's happening in America. And then we have, of course, this lone actor extremism. By the way, a lone actor is always harder to find. So, my friend, we have to realize that things are getting really scary out there. But, again, I want to pull you back to reality. Even though it is getting scary out there, I got to remind us who are a little older that we're not experiencing the organized political warfare that we did back in our day. Think back to the 1960s and the 70s. Think about the demonstrations. Think about Martin Luther King and the people that were abused and killed. Even go back to Reconstruction after the Civil War or the labor conflicts in the early 20th century. Even with all that's happening today, I have to tell you, my friend, that today's political violence levels are still much lower in terms of what has happened with the past bombings, assassinations, and organized campaigns. I lived in that day when President Kennedy was shot and killed. I lived in the day when his brother Robert Kennedy was shot and killed. I lived in the day when Martin Luther King was shot and killed. I lived in the day when they had these mass protests and I lived in the day of Kent University where young people were gunned down by the National Guard. There were some really, really scary times. So even though we're living in a day of extreme political where people are polarized, even though there is a declining trust in institutions, and there's misinformation out there, and there's economic and cultural anxiety, even though we have all this rhetoric today, and today, when we come to the place that we frame politics as a battle between good and evil and this sort of thing, even with all the bad that's happening, it is not as bad as it has been. You see, that's what you're going to get here on Charlie Crimebuster. You're going to get the real truth. Now, I could just, stroke the flames and say it's worse than it's ever been, but it's not worse than it's ever been. But my friend, it is moving in that direction. And it is time that we do something to stop it. It's time that we pull back the rhetoric. It's time that we go back to doing decent debating, that a person has a right for their opinion, they have a right to be heard, and then the other person has a right to be heard. And we ought to cut down the noise, cut down the static, and focus on the issues. There are some important issues that our nation needs to address, and we do not need to have violence interrupting those issues and distracting us from those issues so that they can be properly debated and acted upon as a nation. If you want to change things, don't go shoot people. Go vote. Organize other people to vote. That's how it's done in America. Well, at least that's the way it should be done. Don't you agree? If you agree, let me hear from you. Reach out to me, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Friend, the Bible, and I'm a firm believer in the Bible. I make no apology about that. But the Bible says we ought to pray for those that are in power and authority. The Bible says that we ought to respect the position, and whether or not you respect the person, and that's on both sides of the political aisle, that really is not the issue. The issue is to respect the position. And if we can't get to become a society that every time we disagree with somebody, we want to kill them, we are going to be in a mess for sure. Now, again, the majority of Americans do not feel that way, and I'm glad about that. Even though there's a lot of tension with all the media that we have today and social media, this sort of thing, let's all keep grounded and realize that the majority of the American people do not feel that way. And let's get back to that point to where the majority of American people ought to be able to behave themselves in a decent way with kindness and respect instead of the violence that we see today. Folks, let's leave the violence to the real thugs out there. Let's leave the violence to those criminals that need to be arrested and put away. And let's let common, decent people get back to the debate stage and debate things in a certain way that shows respect for the process. Even though you may not respect the person, respect the process. That's the message that Charlie Crimebuster has today. Well, forgive me for getting a little political there, although it was not on one side or the other. It was just the way America is. I'm so glad to be an American. I hope you are too. We're getting ready to celebrate a very, very important time in our history coming up July the 4th. And I think it's a good time for all of us to examine what kind of an American citizen are we? Why am I? What kind of American citizen are you? And let's all get back to realizing that this nation is not a perfect nation, but I guarantee you it's better than any other country in the world. I believe that wholeheartedly. I hope you do too. Till this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster saying thank you for joining us, and join us next week for another episode. Until this time next time, let me remind you, be safe, be alert. Yep, for the life you save may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and also encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of pixabay.com. That's pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts, or for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster.